Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 14 of What If Naruto was the Jinchuriki of the world leader. If you guys enjoyed this what if, and want to see part 15 of it, comment down below, and let me know. And go ahead, and check out other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. The day after the honeymoon, 2 days after the wedding, it was finally time for the Konoha contingent to make their way home. The merchants, their wares sold or traded and newly acquired wares packed away for the journey, readied the carriages. The ninja made their goodbyes to the new comrades and friends they had made during the exam, and the battle that interrupted it. Samui and Yujito were talking to their father in Mabui, with Kari and Amoy standing with them. So, Kari started after seeing Samui step away from her father's embrace. "How was your honeymoon, Samui?" The blonde Kunoichi gave a small, mischievous smile. "We had a lot of sex," she announced plainly, smirking as Ace stiffened in mortification. "It was good." Kari blushed in embarrassment. "Okay, then, good to know," she muttered, turning away to hug Yujito. "Didn't need to know that, but good to know, I guess." He looked over his daughters had to glare at Naruto, who was standing next to a pair of women who were sobbing all over each other. Feeling the heat from the look, the dragon shinobi glanced at the Raikage and shrugged blithely. "It's the truth." That only made A glare harder, until Samui smacked his arm. "Stop glaring at my husband, Dad," she said, an unbidden smile forming at the word husband. "Married people have sex, there's nothing wrong with it. There's something wrong with it, if my daughters are involved," I proclaimed as Yujito shook her head in exasperation, before hugging him again. Naruto turned to the crying pair, patting the closest to him on the back. "Come on, Satsu, it's time to go. I know you're sad you have to leave, but you can keep in touch with letters," he said comfortingly. "It's not the same," she wailed in time with her new best friend, Yusuke L. "Who am I supposed to get drunk and kill people with? Unko?" he supplied hesitantly. Satsu waved the suggestion off. "PFFT, please. She acts like a sadistic bitch, but she's only a minor sadist, if that. Oh, it just won't be the same," she cried, slumping on dark-skinned woman who grabbed her tightly. "I'll miss you too, bestie," Elle cried, hugging the immortal as a fresh wave of tears rolled out. "Oh, for the love of Mar," Naruto rolled his eyes, tugging Satsu away from the Kumo Kunoichi. "Come on," he grunted, ignoring her protests as the caravan began to move. "If it makes you feel better, I'll see if we can go and find a bandit camp to eradicate, okay? Would that help, Satsu?" "Yeah," she muttered miserably, waving at the distant form of her friend. "Can we bathe in their blood and have angry sex on their corpses?" she asked hopefully. One of his eyes twitched. "Sure," he acquiesced grudgingly. Satsu clapped happily, before turning back. "I, new best friend. I'll miss you. And your chains." "I, new best friend," Elle called back. "I'll miss you and your endurance. And I'll try to get a courier mission or something to Konoha soon, so we can have that three-way." Naruto pinched the bridge of his nose, his other hand fishing his pipe out of his pouch. He glanced at the amused-looking Hokage. "Not a word," he growled, stuffing the bowl and lighting it. "I wasn't going to say anything, my boy," the old man replied with a smile. 2 days later, the caravan had made its way into river country, the sun beating down almost angrily, only to be replaced by the frigid silver moon at night. It had led to Naruto being used a human-shaped hot water bottle, not that he particularly minded. "One thing I hate about traveling in caravans," Kakashi muttered as he wiped the sweat from his brow, "is the speed. We move so slow. Would you rather we leave a large group of our traders and form a ninja alone in a neutral country with no defenses?" Sarutobi asked rhetorically, peering at the Jonin from under his hat, looking completely unperturbed by the heat. Kakashi shrugged. "No. I'm just saying, there has to be a faster way. Like by boat. Or," he snapped his fingers, "we could have Naruto transform into his dragon form and fly everyone back. That would be quicker, right? Have him carry the wagons in his talons while the people ride on his back." Naruto gazed at the silver-haired ninja, his eyes lighting up with burning orange. He growled low in his chest, baring his teeth which sharpened into fangs backlit by the fire building in the back of his throat. "I am not a common pack animal that can be saddled up and ridden like a horse," he hissed at the gray-haired Jonin, his fingers shifting into talons. Hairs inside, rapping Kakashi over the head with the bowl of his pipe. "He was just joking, Naruto. Right, Kakashi?" He glared at the Jonin meaningfully. Right, just joking, Naruto, just joking." Kakashi laughed sheepishly, scratching the back of his head. Naruto took a deep breath, his draconic features fading as he huffed out a puff of smoke. "Very well. I apologize for overreacting, then." He withdrew his pipe and stuffed it with herbs, lighting it with a quick breath. "Don't joke about things like that, though. I am a dragon, and we're prideful creatures." "All lies," Alduin called from inside his son's head. "Pride is for lesser beings. We are just that great naturally. I'll keep that in mind," Kakashi muttered, flipping open his book. Ino skipped up alongside Naruto, having been walking behind them and hearing the conversation. "You'd let me ride you, right?" she asked cheerfully. "Only if I felt like it." Naruto grunted, ignoring the blonde's pout. As the day began to draw to a close, the caravan was settled, with tents erected and fires lit. The tents of the rookies, who were now mostly chunin, were circled around a campfire, chatting in the firelight as various sticks with various meats were roasted over the flames. Naruto sat on a rock with Hinata leaning against his side, reading a scroll of ceiling as he waited for his meal to cook. He would occasionally glance up to see Satsu looking bored, or Suki chatting with Samui, or Yujito and Tenten discussing kunai, or Shino sitting quietly next to a half-asleep Sakura. Sometimes he would spot Hanabi looking at him, but every time they made eye contact, she'd huff and look away. It was starting to irritate him. The dragon glanced down as Hinata gently poked his side, meeting her lavender-tinted eyes. "HM. You need to talk to Hanabi," she murmured softly. "She's been grumpy and moody, and it's probably something to do with you. And knowing her, she won't bring it up by herself." Naruto hummed in thought, peering at Hyuga sitting across the fire. "You're right," he grunted, setting his scroll down and standing up. "Hanabi," he called, jerking his head towards a copse of trees. "We need to talk." Hanabi huffed at him, and folded her arms, looking away until Tenten nudged her shoulder, pointing at Naruto. The Hyuga heiress grumbled under her breath, but followed after him, disappearing into the trees. Finally, Tenten sighed, stoking the fire. Hopefully they cleared the air between them. It was starting to get annoying. "What do you mean, starting?" Satsu muttered boredly, sticking her hand in the fire until it burned and pulling it back out to watch the skin heal. It was fucking irritating. "I don't know why girls think it's cute to dance around. Just fucking say what's on your mind, it's what I do." "Yeah, well, some of us like to be girls." Ino said with a shrug, grimacing in disgust as the silver-haired cultist stuck her hand in the fire again. "Can you not? We're cooking here." Satsu gave her the finger with her charred hand. "Shut up, I'm bored. And since I can't slaughter you all and bathe in your blood, or fuck Master Wildly like I normally would, this'll have to do." "Love you too, Satsu." Hinata sighed uncaringly, having taken up Naruto's spot with her eyes fixed on the ceiling formulae on the scroll. The pair of Konoha chunin walked until they were out of sight of the camp, and once they were deep in the copse, Naruto leaned against a tree and peered at Hanabi questioningly. "What's going on with you?" he asked bluntly. She huffed again and crossed her arms. "Nothing," she muttered, refusing to meet his eyes. "Right, and my eyes are actually brown." The draconic shinobi shot back, frowning. "Hanabi, what's the problem? Why are you acting like this?" "Problem?" Hanabi replied sarcastically. "I don't have a problem, except for the fact that you slept with my sister." Naruto blinked languidly, his expression unchanging. "So?" he asked with a shrug. "So," she exclaimed loudly. So how am I supposed to win when Hinata keeps getting the important things first? I got the first kiss, she got the first date, and I was supposed to be the first one to sleep with you, but no, little Miss Big Chest had to go and mess up the schedule." Naruto arched an eyebrow or near hysterical distress. "Schedule? Do you and Hinata keep little booklets with dates and times penciled in? Monday, 10 o'clock, kiss Naruto. Monday, 11 o'clock, argue with sister." "Well, no, not exactly." Hanabi stammered with a nervous giggle. "It's not like actual schedules or anything, just rough estimates, really." Still, she went ahead of me. "So, what you're really saying is that you're not mad that Hinata got to me first, you're jealous?" the shinobi countered. The Hyuga heiress threw her hands up. "Of course I'm jealous, I thought that would be evident. I mean, you two went against the natural order of things. I'm the blunt one who speaks her mind, Hinata is the shy, demure Yamato Nadeshiko who would only have sex on her wedding night. What did she even say to you that made you sleep together?" Naruto cast his mind back to the end of the second exam. "I want all of you, I think. And I love you, though that came afterwards." He shrugged. "That, and I love her too." Hanabi steeled her expression and marched up to him, settling her hand on his chest and leaning up, her warm breath brushing over his ear. "Naruto, I love you. And I want all of you. Right here, right now." She added to her sultry whisper, by pressing herself against him, and licking his earlobe. Normally, this would have gotten Naruto's fire going, except that Hanabi had, not 2 minutes ago, had admitted that she basically kept scores for their relationship. "Hanabi." Naruto sighed, bringing his hand up to her chest, and pushing her away. "Is it you talking, or your jealousy? Are you really ready to take a step like this, or do you just want to break even with Hinata?" The Hyuga heir spoke. "Of course I mean it," she proclaimed, though she didn't sound as sure as she hoped. Naruto shook his head, pushing off of the tree he was leaning on and walking away. "Think about it, Hanabi. When you know what you really feel, then, maybe, we could talk." He strode off, leaving a thoughtful Kunoichi behind. He took his spot next to the fire after Hinata vacated it, grabbing his meal and digging in as the others had already begun to dine. Dinner was eaten amid quiet chatter, and when it was finished, they began to peel off and head to bed. The next day would be the same as the two before it, nothing but walking or riding on the caravan, occasionally switching positions and talking. Naruto eventually rolled his scroll up and bade his comrades good night, entering his tent to find that his wives had snuck in after having left the fire to sleep earlier. Samui and Yujiro lay under a blanket of fur wearing their underclothes, watching him with smoky eyes. "Hello, husband." The blonde Jinchuriki greeted him with a smile, her sister beckoning him with a crooked finger. "We've been waiting for you." He grinned in return, disrobing quickly and joining the pair on the pile of furs he called a bed. Naruto had discovered that, after transforming, bedrolls just didn't do it for him anymore. Instead, he resorted to using the pelts of the animals he had hunted in Konoha's Forest of Death as bedding, having intended to sell them in Kumo but forgetting. It was easy to transport them around in ceiling scrolls, and by the way his wives looked in his bed made it worth it. Yujiro half straddled his side, her lips pecking his neck and his chest. "Mata-chan wants to play," she purred, her eyes nearly glowing with azure fire. "She's been sending me images from our wedding night all day and I need some relief. We can't play too rough, but go ahead and let her out a bit." Naruto replied, running his fingers through her long blonde hair. The next day would consist of walking the entire team, and doing that with a limp would be annoying. Yujiro closed her eyes and scrunched her face in concentration, black paint-like markings forming around her eyes and cheeks, as the skin around them turned a rippling azure. She smiled slyly, kissing Naruto greedily, her hands grabbing his hair. "Hello, husband." Madatabi whispered, licking her lips. "Sit back and let Mata-chan take care of you." The overshadowed blonde slunk down Naruto's body, straddling his waist and quickly sinking down on his arousal. "That's always kind of weird," Samui commented dryly, watching her sister's body rock on her husband. Yujiro, though far from demure, preferred to make love slow and tender, much like her sister. Madatabi liked it rough and fast, and she was only going as slow as she was because she wasn't in her own body. "She kind of looks like a kabuki character like that. There's nothing wrong with weird, honey." Madatabi smirked lustfully, trailing a hand down Samui's side, before jerking away as if burned. "I said my sister's off limits, Mata-chan." Yujiro growled out through the possession. "I will put you back." Madatabi huffed and crossed her arms. "Fine, no incest." Square. Naruto rolled his hips, making her moan and pulling her attention away from her kinky thoughts. Samui turned his head and kissed his lips, her fingers threading in his hair. Naruto channeled a bit of chakra to his fingertips, gently digging into her shoulders and massaging the knots away as he focused his attention on her mouth. She moaned quietly and pressed herself against him, enjoying the way his pleasantly hot fingers soothed her back pain, and carefully slid down her side, grasping her rear as Madatabi gasped and shuddered atop Naruto. The overshadowed blonde panted quietly, before pushing herself off and getting into a different position and setting a fast pace. Within an hour, the Nibi was sated and Yujiro reappeared, riding Naruto to completion once more before sliding off and quickly falling asleep. With her and her demons satisfied, Naruto turned his full attention on Samui, his wife pulling him on top of her with a happy sigh. He made sure she fell asleep with a smile on her face. In the middle of the night, Naruto woke suddenly, feeling panic for no particular reason. His eyes darted around the tent, wondering what had woken him up. Yujiro groaned in her sleep, rubbing her nose against his chest, and he buried his face in her hair, and went back to resting. The next day, the caravan had passed through Kawa no Kuni, and was treading the border of Kase no Kuni, the area consisting of hard-packed sand, little patches of scrub brush and thin trees. Not everyone enjoyed this, but they had stopped complaining when the Sandaime shot them a shut the hell up glare. He had lived through a few wars and spent a time actually in Suna, not just the border area, so he had quickly grown tired of their bitching when it was much worse a few miles in. Being a dragon, Naruto didn't mind the heat. In fact, he found it very pleasant, his instincts calling for him to spread his wings, catch a thermal and practically float through the sky, basking in the heat and light of the sun. Unfortunately, that went against his orders, and he was unwilling to get reprimanded so soon after becoming Chunin. The good side effect of the heat was that both the civilians and ninja wanted to get out of it as fast as possible, and by the time the sun was beginning to set, the spruce trees became thicker and more numerous, with the ground becoming rich brown dirt and light grass. This also led to the entire group being tired by the end of the day, and they were so relieved to be in Hai no Kuni that they set up camp early. Hiruzen sat near the beginnings of the fire, his pipe in his mouth with small puffs of smoke escaping the bowl. Naruto sat next to him, holding a scroll and going over the information there. No, see, tweaking the second sector of the seal reduces chakra intensity, but also makes the available sealing space smaller. It's useful for quick seals on the go, but if you can take your time, you want to keep your intersector lines straight. He explained in reply to the question. Naruto grunted in thought, making a note in a small handbook as Hana and Inuzuka and Branch Hyuga dropped out of the trees around them. Hokage-sama, we spotted a bandit camp during recon, about half a mile west. What are your orders? Hana reported, kneeling in front of the old man. How many? Hana paused in thought. 13 to 15. Sarutobi hummed thoughtfully, looking at Naruto from the corner of his eye. That cultist of yours has been practically begging to go out and find something to end. Why don't you take her and clear that camp out? He offered. Naruto arched an eyebrow at him. You just want her to stop complaining. He noted shrewdly. Harrison shrugged. I can make that an order, if you want. He replied, deliberately not answering the question. The draconic shinobi nodded and stood, beckoning for Hana to follow him. It didn't take long to find Satsu, who was trying and failing to read a book. Satsu, Rikon found a bandit camp, and the Hokage has tasked us with clearing it out. The silver-haired cultist practically leapt to her feet, tossing the book aside without care. Fuck yes. It's been too long since I've sacrificed anyone to Josh and Sama. She shouted happily, slinging her scythe on her back and nearly skipping towards them. Well, come on, bitch, there's people I need to kill. Hana rolled her eyes at the abrasive cultist, leaping into the trees and leading them west away from the camp. They traveled in near silence, broken intermittently by Satsu giggling to herself. The Inuzuka Chunin stopped, gesturing ahead of her. The camp is about a minute away. What's our plan of attack? I think the best plan would be for you stay back, out of hearing range, and let the two of us take care of it. Naruto replied with a shrug. Hana frowned at him, and he clarified. Satsu gets a little enthusiastic when it comes to killing, and she might attack you. Not to mention her methods can be sort of disturbing. Hana frowned before acquiescing. Alright, fine. But shoot up a flare if you need help, okay? She said, jumping away from them. Naruto and Satsu dropped from the trees, approaching the camp on foot. It consisted of several tents and fires, with several bandits crowded around the latter eating and drinking and chatting loudly. They probably thought they were safe from Konoha ninja, given their location near the border of Hai no Kuni. We can go about this sneakily, taking them out one by one before they know we're here. Naruto reasoned, retrieving his scroll. Satsu shot him an incredulous look. Right, charging straight in like the pair of immortals we are, then. He unsealed his bastard sword, and hefted it easily, the vicious teeth glinting dangerously in the low light. Satsu drew her side, licking the topmost blade with her pink tongue, her eyes glittering with bloodlust and regular lust. Josh and Sama, watch me as I sacrifice the living in your name. She whispered, panting. She burst from the foliage with a wild scream, leaping over the circle of startled bandits to land in the center of a fire, scattering burning logs and embers, the bottom of her cloak catching on fire. Completely uncaring of flames licking her legs, Satsu dove into a group enemy swinging her scythe, cackling in glee. Naruto rolled his eyes. If Satsu wasn't immortal, she'd make a terrible ninja. As it is, she doesn't need to know ninjutsu or be sneaky to be terrifying. But she makes a good distraction, which should allow me to test out the Rasengan. Ignoring the screams coming from the group, he darted into the camp, relieving a bandit stumbling from his tent with an easy swing of his sword. Alarm. One of the sentries screamed in panic as her partner was eviscerated by a swing of Satsu's triple-bladed scythe. Naruto hacked the legs off of a panicking female bandit, before cleaving her top half off, spraying his chest with viscera and spun, hefting his sword over his head, and hurling it at the sentry, Daedra blade spinning through the air to bite deeply into a tree, splitting the sentry's head in half. The largest tent was thrown open as a large, muscled form burst through the flaps, revealing a brutal, scarred man with wild hair and matching bloodshot eyes, followed by an equally intimidating woman. Who dares? He bellowed, clutching a battle axe in one hand. I'll tear your head from. Since he acquired his chains, Naruto had discovered that they could be manipulated slightly, like changing the tip into a kunai or a hook, or making the links bladed. The one he favored at the time was similar to a kunai, but flattened with two hook-like teeth near the back. His chakra easily formed into the chain, as if it had been waiting for him to use it, and it cut through the air, piercing the bandit leader's chest and hooking into his flesh. Naruto grabbed the chain and yanked on it, pulling the leader across the camp towards him. As he flew, the draconic shinobi held his other hand out, focusing the flowing chakra into a spinning, screeching ball that wobbled unsteadily in his palm. He threw his hand forward to meet the bandit leader's gut, the glowing blue technique drilling through flesh and bone with ease before it failed and detonated, spraying him and the surrounding area with mulched body matter. Ha! Naruto grunted, wiping his face. I need more practice. The clearing had fallen silent, a technique, broken only by his mutterings, and the two halves of the bandit's leader, hitting the ground with a wet thump. Satsu laughed manically, tearing her side from her latest victim and moving on, taking advantage of her stunned enemies to cleave through another. The woman who had been with the leader, screamed in anguish and charged at him with her katana over her head, only to be blindsided by Satsu, who didn't bother to dodge, letting the blade of the sword get wedged in her collarbone. The cultist stabbed the woman in the shoulder with her spike and kicked her away, bringing the blood-covered weapon up to her mouth, and licking it in an extremely sexual fashion. The fire that had been burning her during the fight had been quenched by the blood she had spilled, but not before it burned away most of her robes and her bindings, leaving Satsu basically naked. All the better to see her skin darken to black, with white markings over her bones, making her look like some sort of skeleton. Satsu drew Joshin's symbol in the dirt with her foot, kneeling in the circle with a wide, bloodthirsty grin. Suffer with me. She stabbed herself in the thigh, making the woman fall to ground, clutching her own leg, as the wound appeared and began to drip with blood. Satsu repeatedly stabbed herself non-fatally, the wounds being mirrored on the bandit, until she was reduced to shivering, weeping pile of flesh. The cultist's breasts heaved as she panted in pleasure, before gasping as she impaled her heart. The bandit woman shuddered and went still as Satsu let out a loud cry of pleasure, slumping over as the ritual faded, and her skin returned to its normal color. "Ooh, Joshin," she moaned, shakily pushing herself up. "It's been too long." Naruto watched the cultist out of the corner of his eye as she walked over to his still moaning body, plunging her hand into his chest and ripping the heart out, squeezing it out over her face and open mouth. Her visage dripping with blood, her violet eyes alight, she stalked over to Naruto and gripped his hair roughly, pulling his head down and smashing her lips to his, trading blood and saliva with him. The remaining bandits could only quake in fear as the dragon shinobi's eyes went red, his nails becoming talons and Satsu's grin becoming even whiter, despite it seeming impossible. To call it a slaughter would be an understatement. Naruto woke to the sun dancing over his eyes, groaning softly as he stretched, feeling a content Satsu cuddling against his side. He breathed deeply, noting the smell of dried blood, charred flesh and evacuated bowels, sitting up to find himself in the center of the camp. Or, more precisely, what remained of the camp. Various body parts and entrails littered the blood-soaked ground, the smashed and splintered tents, adding to the mess. The only thing left standing was the former leader's tent, the red-stained canvas fluttering limply in the breeze. The dragon sat up with a sigh, his face twisted in a grimace, but not at the carnage that told him Marin's Dagon's gift still worked on him, despite taking his draconic form. It was that, despite the fact that he should be feeling guilty, not for the killing of bandits, but the method, he didn't feel anything. He was a little annoyed at the rampage Satsu had made him go on, despite her knowing he hated not being in control, but otherwise, nothing. Looking over the bodies, Naruto equated it to the feeling he had gotten as an academy student, after learning fire-making methods, which included a weak jutsu, a flint and steel, and a magnifying glass, and using the latter to light ants on fire. "I'm really not human anymore, am I?" he wondered sadly. "No?" Alduin replied bluntly. "You exist on a different level from humanity. Like the relationship between man and dog. They can be beloved partners and friends, but in the end, they are irreconcilably different. You have it harder, having been born human, but in time, you will be at peace. As long as I never see the ones I love as pawns." Naruto thought discontentedly, creating a fiery red summoning portal with a wave of his hand, ember emerging from within. "Cleanse the area, but keep it controlled. No forest fires." He heaved Satsu onto his back as Ember saluted, and set about burning the area to a blackened crisp to rid it of the visceral remains. He searched for the leader's tent, finding a chest full of stolen money and goods, and sealed it away, to look through it later. Naruto trekked through the forest, back towards the campsite. He found it to be empty, leaping into the trees to follow the caravan at a quicker pace. As he hopped through the boughs, he spotted a small lake with a waterfall. Naruto unceremoniously dumped Satsu into the ice-cold water and dived in himself, grasping handfuls of sand, to rub the dried blood away. Satsu came up spluttering and coughing, wiping her violet eyes. "What the fuck was that for, master? You know I hate it, when you send me into a blood rage." He replied simply, shaking his ash-gray hair out. "But I love it when you get all angry and rough and..." She shivered in delight. "It's got to feel good to let go, yeah." Naruto snorted, stepping out of the water and drying himself with a brief burst of fire. "No, it doesn't. I don't like not being in control of myself." He looked up as Ember floated down from the sky. "The job is done. Wind crispy clearing, as ordered," she reported cheerfully, twirling in place. "Time for my payment." She floated forward, seizing Naruto by the cheeks and planting a heavy kiss on him, moaning as his arms wrapped around her. Naruto mentally noted that, despite being made of metal, Ember's lips were rather soft and silky, and the heat was pleasant. He desummoned the Atronach after she was done, and he and his cultists jumped into the trees. After catching up with the caravan and reporting their success in clearing out the camp, the day was rather short as they traveled quickly through familiar territory, the giant wooden gates coming into sight as the sun began to descend. As the caravan entered Konoha, the group breathed a sigh of relief as one, feeling glad that they had made it home after a long journey. The merchants and shinobi dispersed to go home and see family members are simply full asleep. Hiruzen was striding proudly through the streets with his head held high, a smile on his weathered face, as the populace greeted him with respectful bows and words. It made him feel 10 years younger. An Anbu dropped from a nearby rooftop, kneeling deferentially. "Hokage-sama." "Nezumi." Sarutobi greeted with a nod. "Report." "While you were gone, Konoha has successfully completed 483 D-rank missions, 322 C-rank missions, 200 B-rank missions, 186 A-rank missions and 3 S-rank missions. 123 D-rank, 58 C-rank, 22 B-rank and 20 A-rank missions were failed, and 4 Genin, 5 Chunin and 2 Jonin have been killed in action. The relevant paperwork has been compiled, and is waiting for your final approval." Nezumi reported quickly, under his breath, so that none of the civilians could hear what was being said. Ears sighed sadly, biting the stem of his pipe. It was always a shot to the heart to hear that some of his ninja had died, and while he knew it was part of the ninja life, it still hurt. When his work was done for the night, he'd search out the graves of the deceased and pay his respects. I see. Thank you for your report. Nezumi nodded, hesitating slightly, which the Hokage caught. Sir, there's something else. Team Yugao walked along the streets as they made their way to their apartments, ready to end the day, when an Anbu dropped in front of them. Yugao Yuzuki, Naruto Uzumaki, you are required at the hospital. The icy hand gripped Yugao's heart, her breath hitching. Has something happened to Hayate? She asked desperately. The Anbu was slow to answer, confirming her worst fears. I'm afraid so. The Jonin swallowed audibly, her hands shaking as she tried to steel herself. Let's go. The room was quiet and empty, save for the three standing around a metal bed, with a fourth lying on it. Hayate Jekyll lay upon the cold steel surface, his face bland, and his skin pale, his chest unmoving. He was dead. Suffocated by his diseased lungs. When did it happen? Yugao asked quietly, her warm fingers intertwined with her brother's cold ones. Sir Toby sighed heavily. 2 days ago, near the middle of the night. His lungs stopped working as he slept, and he died in his sleep. He bowed his head, his hat shadowing his face. You have my condolences. He was a good man. A good ninja. Konoha is lesser for his loss. Yeah, the Jonin murmured thickly, tears welling up in her eyes, but refusing to spill as Naruto wrapped an arm around her shoulders. I know. He will be given his funeral rites tomorrow. Ninja law. Don't give the enemy a chance to steal your dead. White fluffy clouds dotting a clear blue sky overlooked the pirate cheerful golden beams of light playing about the clearing where Hayate's friends, family and comrades gathered to say goodbye, all wearing black in mourning. The Hokage stood at the foot of the pyre, his expression somber as he read out the rites of the dead, his quiet voice echoing through the silent clearing. Yugao was still as a statue, her eyes locked on the body of her brother lying on the top of a pile of wood, his hands folded in repose. Her expression was blank, and her body was numb. Naruto was nearly glued to her side, her hand gripping his tightly. As we commend his body to the earth, we will never forget Hayate, for what he did as a friend and a comrade, as a brother and a son. And we will never forget who he was, and what he meant to us. His ashes, born from his death, will eventually give birth to new life, another seed of Konoha planted. Hiruzen finished, clasping his hands together and nodding towards Yugao. The Jonin withdrew her hand from Naruto's, shakily going through the signs for Kaiten Jutsu. She blew a weak stream of flame at the base of the pyre, which sprang alight with ironically lively glee. The gathered ninja gave their condolences to her and left, eventually leaving her and Naruto alone, watching as the flames consumed the fuel and the body. When there was nothing left but lightly smoking ashes, Yugao allowed her steel facade to fade, falling to her knees as silent tears poured down her cheeks. Naruto knelt in front of her, his red eyes meeting her soft brown, glimmering dully with pain and loss. Slowly, she reached out and wrapped her arms in him, hugging him tightly and burying her face in his shoulder. Naruto held her as she shook with quiet sobs, his eyes hot as he cried with her, for the loss of one of his teachers, a friend and an uncle. Wherever his spirit went, Naruto knew Hayate was finally free of his pain his body inflicted on him, looking down on them with that warm, loving smile of his. Naruto woke with little fanfare, blinking slowly in the sunlight streaming into the room. He sniffed quietly and slowly looked around, recognizing the place as Tsume's bedroom. She had creamy tan walls interrupted by the occasional trophy, and a pile of furs serving as a comfortable bed. And, of course, the naked body of said woman splayed over his chest. Even with the advent of spring beds, the Onizuka still preferred to sleep on furs, though with a frame. Seda kept them in touch with their origins as a clan of nomadic hunters, and stopped them from getting too used to luxury. Given their feral nature and love of hunting, Naruto was pretty sure the Onizuka were descended from the Kajiat, intermixed with the orcs and Nords. Likely a mix of all three, as it was with everyone in the current age. After Marin's Dagon's lieutenant was summoned and they'd shattered through Master, the remaining humanoids who had survived the impact had no option but to hide, intermarrying and breeding over thousands of years. Given that the human-looking races were the more numerous, eventually the elven and near-human types, like the Kajiat and Argonians, were bred out of existence, though certain traits passed on still showed up, like the Kajiat's wandering nature, the orcs' rage or the high elves' arrogance. While he pondered on the state of the world, and how much it had changed, Naruto's hand settled above Tsume's tailbone, and he smirked to himself, gently scratching the spot with his nails. Tsume's back arched unconsciously, making her groan and wake up, nuzzling his neck with her nose. You're asking for a bout of morning sex, mister, she whispered, kissing his jaw, even if I'm still a little sore from last night. Wordlessly, a healing spell wrapped around her and soothed her ache, making the Onizuka matriarch grin to herself and straddle his waist. She sank down on his length with a pleased moan, while Naruto grasped her hips and returned the favor. An hour later, the two spooned, basking in the post-sex glow. Well, Tsume groaned, breathing heavily, that's one way to wake up. She hummed happily, feeling the light kisses he was placing on the side of her neck. She frowned slightly to herself before rolling around to face Naruto, her fingers trailing down his cheek as she looked at him with worried affection in her slitted brown eye. "What's wrong?" he asked, stroking her side. Tsume sighed, kissing his nose. "When I heard about what had happened in Kumo, I won't lie, I was worried about you. I didn't want to lose you again. I'm glad you came back to me." She huffed, nuzzling his neck. "Listen to me," sounding like a teenage Kunoichi. "You see what you've done to me." Naruto kissed her gently, making her groan into his mouth. "Do you have a problem with it?" he asked seriously. The Inuzuka matriarch chuckled briefly. "Hell no, Ryu-kun. But you better take responsibility for these feelings you're making me feel." She rolled off of the bed and strode towards her bathroom, peeking at him over her shoulder. "You can start by joining me in the shower." Naruto nearly scrambled after her, except that he was dragon, and dragons don't scramble. He exited the Inuzuka compound with a small smile on his face, and his hand tucked into his pockets, walking down the street with an easy stride. It fell as he looked up the sky, seeing fat white clouds floating in a sea of blue. With a small jolt, he realized why he felt restless. His instincts were begging him to take his true form and leap into the sky, feeling the wind over his scales. As it was, he felt constrained, imprisoned on the ground. Naruto huffed. The answer was pretty simple. Get a solo C-rank mission, and fly away for a bit. But he had just gotten home 2 days before, and he had people to visit. He would do so later. After a while, an Anbu dropped from a nearby rooftop, presented him with a short scroll, and vanished in a puff of smoke. Reading the message, the dragon felt his spirits lift. Karin had finally made her way to Konoha from Kusa. Apparently, the village hidden in the grass didn't want to give their Uzumaki up, especially to a village that already had one. But the Sandaime Hokage had pointed out, politely, that the Uzumaki were not the Bijuru, and that the clan had last been based out of Konoha anyway. It was also pointed out that grass was really easy to burn, not to mention that her closest living relative was a man who could transform into a very large dragon. They had conceded grudgingly, charging Konoha for a C-rank escort mission, which had arrived just now. Burning the scroll, Naruto set off for the Hokage Tower with a renewed pep in his step. Though, he was dissatisfied with the facts they had gotten wrong. He wasn't a man who could turn into a dragon. He was dragon who could turn into a man. Upon entering the tower, he headed straight up, finding the Hokage's office with the door open. Inside, standing in front of the Hokage's desk with angry postures, were the Kusa team, a bunch of average-looking men, plus Karin, who looked happy to be in Konoha. She sensed him enter the room first, spinning around and launching herself at him with a happy cry. "Naruto." Naruto caught her out of the air and embraced her slender form tightly, spinning her around once before setting her back down. "It's good to see you again, Karin. You didn't have any trouble on the way here, did you?" His tone was friendly, but the flat look he gave the Kusa team over her head promised fiery violence if he didn't like what he heard. She shook her head negatively, pressing herself into his side. "No, there wasn't any trouble." Karin looked away and mumbled, though not for the lack of trying. Sarutobi smiled warmly round the pipe in his mouth. "I'm glad I can welcome you to Konoha, Karin Uzumaki, even if not as a Kunoichi. I hope you will enjoy making a new home for yourself here." His smile faded, replaced by a stern visage as he looked to the Kusa team. "As for you, you should know that I am considering hostile action towards Kusa for keeping the identity of an Uzumaki clan member a secret from Konoha. As the previous clan head resided here and aimed at her home, as does the current head, I would fully be within my legal rights to embargo Kusagakure." The jonin paled quickly. "It was through no fault of ours. Karin Uzumaki never expressed the desire to join Konoha. Don't go blaming me, Takahashi." Karin yelled, pointing an angry finger at the man. "I didn't know there were any other Uzumaki left. If I had, I would have left in a heartbeat, and you know it." Takahashi growled and snapped at her. "Shut your mouth." Naruto stepped in front of Karin, a low rumbling coming from his chest, as his teeth began to sharpen and blacken into fangs. "What was that?" he asked with a voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. The jonin gulped audibly. "Nothing," he mumbled quickly. "Ahem." The Sandaime cleared his throat meaningfully. "I'll thank you not to speak to my citizens like that, jonin." Takahashi nodded quickly. "Good. Now, since you withheld information from us, I'm going to demand information in return. Anything you have on any possible Uzumaki, rumors and facts alike." The Kusa jonin sighed and nodded in agreement. "Very well, I will take your demands to my leader. But, know this. You have made an enemy of Kusagakure this day. Any Konoha ninja found within our borders will be captured and interrogated." He pulled a scroll from his pouch and tossed it on the desk contemptuously. Hiruzen hummed in thought as he unrolled and read the missive quickly. "I see," he said with a nod, before rolling it back up and tossing it to Naruto. "Naruto-kun, if you would give them our answer." The dragon shinobi clenched the scroll in his fist, fire roaring from his palm to consume it quickly. It crumbled to ash a second later. "We don't care," he stated, flicking ash from his hand. "Your response has been noted." The jonin replied shakily. The Sandaime smiled darkly. Good. Now, get out of my village. The Kusa team spun around quickly and marched from the room, and the Hokage gestured for one of his Anbu. The masked man knelt before him a second later. If they're still here 3 minutes from now, throw them out. He ordered. Yes, sir. The man replied, vanishing in a gust of wind. The older man sighed and leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples and drawing on his pipe. I'm getting too old to deal with politics. He grumbled, peering at the Uzumaki from under the brim of his hat. No matter the number, the Uzumaki clan is always capable of giving me a headache. Worth it. Naruto shrugged, slinging an arm around Karin's shoulders. What else do you need from Karin? Just a few things. He answered, grabbing a blank scroll and writing briefly. Do you have any special abilities, Karin-chan? The Uzumaki clan is known for having diverse abilities that are not quite bloodlines and vary from person to person. For instance, Naruto and his mother can create chains from their chakra. Karin slowly flushed to the roots of her crimson hair. Well. She gulped quietly, playing with her fingers. If it's something embarrassing you don't want to speak of out loud, you can write it down. Hiruzen offered kindly. It's not that, it's just kind of shameful. She muttered, fingering her sleeve before slowly pulling it up. Her arm was covered in sets of bite marks. If I let someone bite me, I can transfer my chakra directly to them, healing them a great deal, but the marks never fade. The Sandaime stilled. And just how many marks do you have, if you don't mind me asking? He asked carefully. Karin hesitantly lifted her sleeve up to her shoulder, revealing several sets, then hiked her shirt up a bit so that they could see the others on her torso. Hiruzen hummed. So, that's why Kusa tried to refuse my demands, he muttered in thought, before shaking his head. Well, Karin-chan, you won't have to use that skill, unless you want to. Here. Anything else? She shook her head quietly. Very well, then. He finished writing the information down, before stamping the scroll and storing it away. Now, there are a few stipulations. You need to find a job within 2 months. It can be anything, though, given that you are capable of using your chakra, I would recommend being an in-village medic nin, nurse of the like, or if you show the aptitude, you could join the cryptology department. I am well practiced with medical jutsu, Hokage-sama, and I would prefer to help people, if at all possible, she replied shyly. Hiruzen smiled and nodded encouragingly. Very well. The hospital is always looking for more doctors and nurses, and I have the feeling the entire medical division will be getting plenty of attention in the coming years. He looked to Naruto. Naruto-kun, please show Karin-chan around town. Show her the sights and such. I assumed you will want to house her in your complex. Is that still the case? Of course, old man, Naruto answered firmly. No family of mine is going to live unsupported. Karin blushed prettily, and hugged his side, hiding her face against his chest. The Sandaime grinned slightly and continued. After you have finished, please come see me. I have a mission for you, personally, that must be dealt with soon. Yes, sir. He nodded. Is there anything else you require? No, Chunin Uzumaki, Hiruzen replied formally, before nodding to Karin. Welcome to Konoha, Karin Uzumaki. I hope your family prospers among the leaves. Karin, recognizing the welcome and dismissal, bowed deeply. Thank you for welcoming me, Hokage-sama. Together, the two Uzumaki left the office behind, and descended to the ground floor. Once they stepped outside, Karin stopped and inhaled deeply, a warm smile on her face. Smells like home, she commented. Naruto gave her a one-armed hug and smile. I'm glad you think so. Come on, I'll show you around, introduce you to everyone. She slung an arm around his waist and leaned into his side. Alright, Naruto-kun. Let's go. The Uzumaki pair spent hours walking through the village. Naruto showed her the mission offices, the ninja academy, the hot springs, and the best places to buy groceries and all that. He also took her up a long, winding stone path. How much farther? Karin asked, breathing heavily. Not too much, we're almost there, he replied with a hidden smirk as they came to the top of the path. He pushed through the bushes. Take a look. What is? The former Kunoichi gaped in awe as she took in the sight before them. Sprawling out in every direction was the hull of Konoha. She could see the Hokage Tower standing proudly in the distance, and could just barely make out the far-away forms of civilians and ninja wandering through the streets. Karin could even barely make out the wall surrounding the village, and they were so far away. Wow. It's amazing, isn't it? Said Naruto with a grin. It's one of the best spots in the village. Yeah. She murmured, before turning and throwing her arms around Naruto. I'm so glad I met you that day, Naruto. You saved my life, and now, I have a real home and family. He embraced tightly, kissing the top of her head. I'm happy as well. He hugged her for a bit more, before pulling away. You want to grab lunch? Her stomach growled at the thought of food. Oh, God yes. I'm starving. She answered eagerly. Naruto chuckled. Well, I had the perfect place in mind. He made to leave, but Karin groaned. We have to walk more. She pouted cutely. My legs are tired. Can you carry me, Naruto-kun? Karin attempted to give him a sad, pitiful look. The dragon shinobi laughed, and patted her cheek. Puppy eyes don't work on me, Karin-chan. I'll still carry you, but only because I want to. He stopped her from climbing on his back and held his arms out. Here. She blushed and slowly wrapped her arms around his neck and her legs around his waist, feeling very childish as she did. This is weird, she grumbled. Give it a second. Naruto replied, before jumping off of the cliff. Karin screamed in his ear as they plummeted towards the ground. Then his wings snapped out as they fell, catching the wind causing them to gently glide to the ground. There we go. Once she realized they were on terra firma, Karin fell on her rear and quickly scrambled to her feet, her hair frazzled. That wasn't funny. I thought so, he replied with a chuckle. She crossed her arms and looked away from him with a pout. So mean. Naruto just put his arm around her shoulders and led her to his spot, and she leaned into him a minute later. They entered a ramen stand, with Naruto throwing the curtain aside. Old man Ichiraku. Aim-chan. I have someone I want you to meet. A cheerful feminine voice called out from the back. Just a second, Naruto. I knew you'd be coming soon, I'm almost done. A bald older gentleman waved at them from behind the counter with a wide grin. Naruto, my boy. Good to see you again. His kind brown eyes fixed on Karin. Who's this pretty young lady with you? This is Karin Uzumaki. She's my cousin, who moved here from Kusa today. Naruto introduced her, taking a seat at the counter. Karin, this is Tuchi Ichiraku. I've been eating here for years, and they make the best ramen in the world. Ramen? Karin asked, interested. Sounds delicious. What flavors do you make? All the flavors. Tuchi bellowed boisterously, but we're not just limited to ramen, young miss. We also make udon, sukiyaki and all sorts of dishes. Karin pored over the menu for a few seconds before looking up. Can I get a large bowl of the seafood ramen, with a plate of egg rolls to share? One large bowl of seafood ramen and one plate of egg rolls, coming right up. The owner saluted, getting down to work. Naruto reached over the counter and filled a teapot with jasmine tea, and snagged a few cups, pouring decent measures of the hot liquid for both of them. To new homes. He toasted, clinking his cup against Karin's. To new family. Karin replied with a grin. They took a drink, and sighed as one of the taste. Aim stepped out from the back, carrying a large bowl of ramen with what looked like most of a steak among the noodles and broth. You're special, Naruto. She announced, setting it in front of the dragon. Don't forget your payment. She leaned forward, puckering her lips. Chuckling, Naruto grasped her chin and kissed her softly, making her sigh in happiness. As they separated, Naruto found Tuchi looking at him, and arched an eyebrow in question. What? The owner leveled his ladle at him threateningly. Don't even think about trying that on me, young man. He said mock seriously. My payment comes in money, not kisses, you hear? Naruto laughed and made to dig into his lunch, but stopped upon realizing that Karin had his right arm in a death grip, while she gave him an affronted glare. He switched his chopsticks to his left hand and started eating as the two women stared each other down. Naruto was pulled from his meal as Tuchi set a plate of egg rolls down between them, breaking the stalemate off. Your ramen is coming right up, little miss. Go in the back and grab the new batch of noodles. We need to prepare for the lunch rush. Okay, Dad, the waitress replied with a smile, kissing Naruto on the cheek and heading to the back as the curtain opened and her father cried out, Irish Seamus. Afternoon, Samui's cool tone floated into his ears as his wife sat down next to him. Hello Naruto-kun. Samui-chan, he greeted her with a smile, kissing her briefly. How's your day been? Good, so far. Suki and I were sparring. She should be right behind me. She trailed off as said Uchiha strode in with damp hair. Afternoon, Suki said calmly, taking a seat beside Karin. You must be Karin. Naruto's been talking about you. Pleased to meet you, Karin replied with a polite nod to Samui and Suki. Who are you? This is Suki Uchiha, Naruto introduced, gesturing to the ladies. And this is Samui Uzumaki. The radiant shot a surprised look at the buxom blonde. No way, you're an Uzumaki too. How many are in Konoha? Samui counted. Besides myself, my sister Yujito and our mutual friend Tenten. Though, I should be clear, we're not related to Naruto the way you are. We're Uzumaki by marriage. She smiled slightly as Am placed her order of sukiyaki in front of her. Karin gaped. Marriage? She asked in a shocked whisper. You're married to 3 women. Naruto nodded simply. Yup. And I love each and every one of them. Suki reached across Karin to grip his arm tightly. I love you too. Am injected herself in the conversation by leaning across the counter and kissing the dragon shinobi briefly. I expect you to keep your promise, you know. She murmured, serving Suki her spicy udon. And I will, when things have settled down. I haven't forgotten. Naruto replied softly, reaching over to grasp her hand. Karin slumped in her seat, resting her head on the counter with a soft thump. Just what kind of village have I moved to? She asked herself, before shooting up. Wait. I'm not expected to have 5 husbands, am I? Of course not. Samui denied around a mouthful of noodles. Not unless you want to, that is. Oh, good. She sighed, digging into her meal. Over the next few minutes, the ramen stand slowly filled to bursting, mostly with ninja, including the rest of Team 7, 8, 9 and 10. though they weren't known as that any longer. With most of the genin being promoted, the teams were being reshuffled. Kiba, Choji, Shikamaru and Sakura would probably end up under Might Guy if he was so inclined, and barring any apprenticeships, it was possible they would be passed from sensei to sensei until they were promoted. As he tipped the bowl back to drink the broth, Naruto noticed something out the corner of his eye. Or rather, the conspicuous lack of someone. He called quietly, "Can I get a to-go bowl of fish udon?" "Sure," the waitress replied, getting started. A few minutes later, she passed the container to him. "Here you go." "Thanks." Naruto paid for his and Karin's meals and left a healthy tip. "Samui, can you show Karin home? I'm going to check on Yuga-sensei." He wiggled the bowl for emphasis. "Sure," she nodded, pressing her lips to his quickly. "We'll see you at home." Naruto stood and left, waving to his friends and lovers as he disappeared through the curtain. He strode quickly through the streets, finding his way to Yugao's apartment complex with familiar ease. As he walked up the steps, he was stopped by a door opening and admitting Anko Mitarashi. "Oh hey there, Ryu-kun," she greeted him with a flirtatious wink. "You know, you were out of the village for a few months. Who knows who you could have met, what kind of ideas they could have given you. I think you need a visit to T&I. He gave her a flat look. "I'm not here to roleplay again, Anko. I'm checking in on sensei." Anko blinked, her teasing visage gone. "Oh, okay then. Well, come by whenever, Ryu-kun, I haven't seen you in a bit. We should get dango sometime. It is the food of the gods, after all." "Sure, you filthy heathen," Naruto replied without heat. Anko snuck a quick grope of his rear as she passed him in the hallway, sending another wink his way before sauntering off, allowing Naruto to continue his journey only slightly molested. He knocked on Yugao's door gently, stepping back as the door was opened by Kurenai. "Hey, Naruto," she greeted with a small smile. "I was just about to go get lunch myself. I doubt you would mind staying here for a bit, would you?" "Not at all, Kurenai," he replied easily, stepping in after her and taking his boots off. "How's she doing?" "I'm doing just fine, Naruto-kun," Yugao interjected irritably, looking extremely out of place with her messy hair and paw print-covered pajamas. "I wish I could train, at least. Being stuck inside on a sunny day is not my idea of productive. Now Yugao, you know that the morning week is necessary for a shinobi to accept their situation in a healthy manner, so that they don't try to bury themselves in work." Kurenai lectured, hands on her hips. "You should take this as an opportunity to relax and unwind. You'll regret missing the chance later." "I know, Mom," the purple-haired Jonin snarked back, flopping back on her couch. "Is that for me?" she asked, noticing the takeout container. Naruto passed her the udon and chopsticks with a wry smile. "Sure is." Kurenai smiled at them and pulled her sandals on. "I'll be back in an hour or so, Yugao." "Naruto-kun, don't let her convince you to spar or anything like that." "I won't." The dragon shinobi waved her off, settling down on the couch with his sensei. "Go get lunch." The red-eyed woman waved and set off, shutting the door behind her. The apartment was silent, except for the slurping of noodles and the tapping of Naruto's nails on the arm of the couch. Once Yugao was finished, she set the container aside and laid her head in her student's lap with a sigh. "How are you really doing, sensei?" Naruto asked seriously, beginning to run his fingers through her lengthy purple locks. "I lost my brother and friend," she replied quietly. "I'm hurting. But I'm a kunoichi, I have been for years. I'll move on, always remembering him, and the hurt will fade with time. She sighed, closing her eyes. "I just wish I had been there. When he died. I should have been there. We should have been there. You blame us, sensei." If she hadn't been leading a team, she wouldn't have been in Kumo, and could have been with her brother, when he finally stopped breathing. "Only a little bit," Yuga replied truthfully, "but I know we can never predict when someone's going to die. We couldn't have known when we left for Kumo. And I can't really blame you for Hayate's death, Naruto. You were the one who kept making all those potions for him." They settled into a comfortable silence that lasted for a good while, until Naruto broke it. "Did you see how Suki fared in the final exams?" he asked eventually. "You noticed that she was using the basic crescent moon dance too?" She replied rhetorically. "I was waiting to see if any of you were promoted before I gave any thought to actually training her in this style. Now that all three of my students are chunin, I'm going to approach Makoto and Suki in a few days about taking her under my wing." "I think Hayate would have liked that," Naruto told her with a small smile. "I think so, too." Naruto left Yugao's apartment a few hours later, and made his way to the Hokage's office. He found Sarutobi writing a mission scroll with Jiraiya standing in the corner, apparently thinking really hard. Or sleeping. Hiruzen looked up as Naruto entered and nodded for him to take a seat, before suddenly yelling, "Jiraiya." The Toad Sage jumped in surprise, hitting the ceiling and sticking there. "I'm not hungover," he cried, before slipping from his spot and hitting the ground with a thud. "Ow, the back of my face. You said you had a mission for me, Hokage-sama," Naruto asked with an amused smile. "Did I do, Naruto?" The sense of humor disappeared faster than if Danzo had entered the room. "It's very important. You recall what we talked about the day before your wedding?" You want us to find Tsunade? The dragon offered. No? Hiruzen shook his head. I want you to find Tsunade. Jiraiya has a lot of work to do. Naruto frowned in thought. But I'm just a chunin. Jiraiya is a Sanin, shouldn't he be the one to find Tsunade? Or both of us together? The Sandaime nodded. Usually, yes, however. My intelligence said that the Akatsuki wouldn't be making a move for another 3 years, Jiraiya supplied, peeling himself off of the floor. He retrieved a notebook and pulled several pages out. As you saw during the final exam, that was a load of horseshit. He methodically shredded the paper and threw it into the air. Yay for bad intel. What my student is trying to say is, his information network screwed up, and he needs to find out how he got such bad intelligence or, if they changed their plans radically, why. Here's inside a cloud of smoke. To be frank, we need more intelligence if we are to combat the threat of Akatsuki presence, and with their attack on Kumo, they are quite the threat, unafraid of instigating combat with a hidden village. A village being visited by the cages, no less. I see. When am I leaving? Naruto asked seriously. Jiraiya rubbed his eyes groggily. We'll be leaving tomorrow morning, once I'm not so hungover. We'll be traveling together for the first leg of the journey, and I'll be splitting off in Ryuji Guide to examine my network. Hiruzen tapped his desk meaningfully. Chunin Naruto Uzumaki, as the Sandaime Hokage of Konoha, you are charged with the retrieval of Tsunade Senju to be the Go-Daime Hokage. This is an A-class mission, with provisional S-class pay should something interrupt your task. I accept this mission and vow to complete it to the best of my ability, Naruto replied, bowing low before taking the mission scroll and storing it away. What time should we meet tomorrow? 9? No, 10 o'clock. The Sanin answered, before disappearing in a flurry of leaves. I am sorry to thrust this responsibility on you, Naruto, especially after such a short amount of downtime. But, your diverse set of skills and abilities makes you the best candidate to find and retrieve my wayward student, while Jiraiya does his job. The Sandaime leaned back in his chair with a sigh, tossing a small scroll to Naruto. That is an official order of recall. Show it Tsunade, and she'll know that, if she refuses, she and her apprentice will be declared as Nukenin and her family estate will be liquidated. Naruto frowned at the thought. Would you really do that, old man? Destroy the compound her family, your sensei built? Truthfully, no. Hiruzen sighed heavily. I couldn't do that to my sensei's legacy, but the threat of such should let her know that I'm being very serious about this. I see. The dragon nodded. Well, I'm off to home. I've got to pack and let my wives know I'll be leaving. What's my timeline? After 2 weeks, we'll assume something has happened and send Hunter-nin out to either find your bodies or bring you back by force, the Sandaime replied in answer. I see. See you later, old man. Naruto burst into flames and vanished within the conflagration, leaving behind the smell of brimstone. Ha! That was a new one. You're really leaving tomorrow? Karin asked in a mix of shock and disbelief. But, I just got here. You just got back from Kumo, where you died. I know. Naruto replied with a shrug. It's the life of a ninja. We never stop. Doesn't mean we're happy about it, Samui grunted, picking at her sushi. I wanted to go on a date tomorrow. We'll go on one when I get back, he assured her comfortingly, squeezing her hand. I think I'm legally required to take a week-long break after 2 missions in a row. I can't believe you're going to meet Tsunade of the Sanin. Tenten gushed with stars in her eyes. You have to tell me what she's like. And get her autograph for me. No, wait, that's too forward. Ichido rolled her eyes. Tenten, your inner fangirl is showing. He's bringing her back here, remember? You can ask her for an autograph yourself. Who's Tsunade? Mira asked curiously. I recognize the name, I think, but I've been hearing so many strange names that they kind of blend together. Naruto arched an amused eyebrow at the weapon mistress who was practically vibrating in her seat. You want to take this one, Tenten? As if on cue, Tenten spoke. Tsunade of the Sanin is the last of the Senju bloodline, being the granddaughter of the first Hokage and founder of Konoha, Hashirama Senju. She's called the strongest Kunoichi, the world's strongest woman, the legendary medic and slug Sanin of Konoha. And, the legendary, sucker. Her enthusiasm faded at the last title, and she looked very sheepish. Ila raised a brow in surprise. A legendary Kunoichi and medic also does pornography. The people around the table burst out laughing, with exception of Tenten, whose face burned with embarrassment. No, she's not a porn star. Naruto said between chuckles. She's known for being very bad at gambling, often taking sucker bets, hence the title. Oh? The hunters huffed. Well, that's confusing. And your Hokage wants her to replace him. With her reputation. Her rep as a gambler is outweighed by her skill as a medic and strength as a Kunoichi, the dragon answered, finishing off his steak. Not to mention her connection to the previous Hokage makes her very desirable as a leader. I see, Mira replied with a twist of her mouth. Naruto stacked his silverware on his plate, and took his dishes up, stopping at every seat around the table, to give the occupant a kiss on the lips, except for Karin, who got one on the cheek. Well, I've got the feeling tomorrow is going to be trying, so I'm going to bed. Good night, everyone. Mira hastily wiped her mouth and grabbed her dishes, following him into the kitchen. Wait, Naruto. Can I spend the night with you? Naruto looked to his wives, he nodded in affirmative. Sure, Mira. Let's go to bed. He set his dishes in the sink and headed for the bathroom to brush his teeth. The Dragonborn carefully squeezed a measure of toothpaste onto her brush, before sticking it in her mouth. You know, I'm still not used to all these conveniences, she said around her brush. I mean, in my time, only Jarls, Imperials or milk drinkers used toothbrushes, and they were usually made of horsehair wood. Naruto frowned in thought. I've never understood why milk drinker is an insult, he wondered aloud. I mean, most everyone likes drinking milk, right? So why is it an insult? Well, because it's talking about the milk from a mother's teat, not cow or goat milk, Mira explained. I know that, but it's not entirely clear the first time you hear it, he replied, spitting and rinsing his mouth. Mira shrugged and followed suit, leading the way into the bedroom. Once inside, she turned out the lights and pushed Naruto onto the bed. Let's not talk about sucking some mother's teats any longer, she whispered. Instead, use that mouth on mine instead. She discarded her shirt with a flourish, exposing her bare chest to his sight. Naruto sat up and gave her what she desired, kissing and bathing her breasts with his mouth as his hands massaged her hips. Mira groaned in pleasure as her fingers gripped his pale gray hair, and his arousal pressed against her own through their underclothes. She enjoyed his attention for a minute longer before reaching down between them and pulling his length from his underwear, drawing hers aside to sink down on his arousal with a pleased moan. Naruto laid back and she braced her hands against his chest to set her own fast, rough pace, their breath coming in harsh pants. She gasped as he rolled his hips as she descended, spearing deeper into her than before. Mira moaned, gripping his arms tightly. Do that again. He did, and their pace increased once more until the Dragonborn shuddered atop the dragon, her walls fluttering around his length as she orgasmed. She slumped on top of him until he gripped her hips and rolled them around so that he was on top, using his new position to set his own blistering pace. The bed creaked under the passion and strength of their lovemaking, and Mira locked her legs around Naruto's waist, grasping the back of his neck and kissing him roughly. Minutes later, Naruto groaned into her mouth and pressed her tighter to him, twitching as he released himself inside of her. He shifted so that he was resting beside her, letting his stamina recover from the bouts. Mira waited until her breathing had evened out before slipping out of his arms, crawling up to the top of the bed and grabbing the headboard tightly. The night is far from over. She grinned widely. Maze, Dakun. Ofen dar Devaki and Hingon. Naruto felt his stamina and arousal rush back, and he quickly entered her from behind, setting off another bout, one of many that would last long into the night. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification, and also check out the other videos that I have created, and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.